but it wasn't on it. And we lost it. In my head, in my head, in my head. Where you at? Underlay, in my head.
Hey, son.
Hey, Bob.
You know you can talk to me.
Yeah. What is hope?
Could we have roll call, please?
Iverson. Here. Schatzinger.
Here.
Reamer.
Here.
Gallops.
Here.
Bernert.
Here.
Kotsky. Sorensen.
Here.
Split.
Here.
We have a quorum.
justice for all.
We don't have anyone here for the invocation, so I'll just have a moment of silence. Thank you. All right. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
And moved by John, seconded by Steve. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved.
On Zoom, she's finished up the report. It should be in your packets for review. I got it out a few weeks ago as well. So I will turn it over to Allison. She'll give a kind of summary, and then if anybody has any questions, certainly ask.
Tonight. Thank you so much for letting me join virtually. It's better for me, better for my dog who gets to be right next to me while I do this. But I wanted to just take a few minutes to introduce the report. It's obviously been a little more than a month since I was with you last when we had our mission. During our interviews. So this product that I launched last year, it's called Civic Health Check. You guys are actually my first client to purchase this service, so I'm very eager to hear your feedback. And basically where I saw a gap in the municipal government market was you could pay analysis, but it wasn't always a product that really fit a budget, or it didn't necessarily get the results that an organization wanted. So I wanted to find a product that was much more affordably priced and develop something that would give organizations a little necessary, and as stewards of public dollars, you need to be responsible in where those dollars go. So being a taxpayer myself, being on the finance committee in the community I live in, stewardship is important. And I wanted to create a product that helped guide elected officials and department heads to as their strengths so that they could identify ways that they could improve in the near future. My other grievance with long-term range documents such as comprehensive plans or even strategic plans is sometimes they're just a little bit too far of an outlook, and they can be hard to take action on into the future. It can be really difficult to grasp how you can use that today or within the next budget cycle. So my goal with this product is really to give that pulse check on what can you do in the near term. So imagine, you go for your annual wellness exam at the doctor. They check your vitals, they maybe do some blood draws, they tell you to lose 10 pounds and to come back next year, right? And then whether or not you listen in that next year varies. I know I usually don't, but the goal is to think short term, which is a little bit opposite of how we often think about with every single department head and most of council. And I really appreciated your time in those interviews. I know how busy everyone is, but it's such a fabulous way for me to get kind of that fly on the wall look at what's going on in Ripon. And my goal through is for when people review these reports and they see the SWOT analysis section, it really resonates with them and they say, wow, it's like you work here. And that's a testament to the fact that people are very, very, very honest with me when they get a chance to talk one-on-one. I really love building help you come up with solutions. Sometimes organizations get a little bit uncomfortable hearing the weaknesses section, and I want to just remind my clients always that every single organization has weaknesses, but only strong organizations choose to acknowledge them and work on them. So the fact that you're open to having the conversation about where you could find areas of improvement is a testament to how strong your organization is. So this report, it's not really short because I'm not good at concise in anything I do, but the goal was to develop something that you could easily digest that gave you a high level overview of what's going well and what is even. So we'll spend just a couple minutes going over the SWOT analysis, and then I'll dive into the actual health check where it assigns grades based on different elements of organizational health. After that, I'm more than open to have conversation, and we can also go over stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this was distilled entirely from my conversations that I had across the course of the month of September with department heads and elected officials, as well as the results from the anonymous surveys. It's what I heard from folks in the organization. So you can see that some of the strengths have to do with both the vibrancy and the welcoming and inclusive nature of the community, as well as how collaborative the community is, really seeking to share too. Something that's kind of overwhelming in conversations with staff and elected officials is sort of this disappointment with the fact that some elements of infrastructure have not been taken care of to the extent that they should have been in the past. But it's important to pat yourself on the back when you do have a win. And everybody I talked to demonstrated such a great deal of excitement about the changes and investments that are happening in the community, overdue perhaps, but that recognition that positive investment is happening is being felt by the community and by staff, and people are excited about it because it gives them something to be proud of in Ripon. Organization has them. Don't beat yourself up too much about it. The fact that you're willing to acknowledge them and work on them is a testament of what a strong organization this is. Some of the weaknesses we heard were, like I just mentioned, the fact that there is a very large to-do structure updates that need to be done, and economically it's a difficult feat that's going to take quite a bit of time to catch up on all of them, and it can be a little bit disheartening to feel like we're never going to get these all done. I heard that sentiment from both elected officials and staff members. Now, and I want to make sure it's clear that I am not by any means calling Adam out in the second bullet point, but you are a little lean on your management side. And what I mean by that is oftentimes in organizations, like government organizations, you see two sort of strengths at play in your management. Administrator or your manager and a human resource director, which obviously the administrator fills both of those roles in Ripon. So you have someone who's super strong at process management and operations, sort of like the numbers and compliance. Somebody in a management capacity that could provide greater soft skills. And I don't think Adam has the time to do everything that he does in his job and provide that. I think you'd be well served in the future to create another element of management. In fact, not performance reviews, but almost like stay interviews where they're really having leadership understand what their goals are, what their strengths are, what their personality type and strengths assessment is, and what their future career track might look like in the org. Involved in operations, it's hard to create that time. There's only so many hours in the week. We heard some challenges from the recent succession planning and turnover that's happened, that it could have been managed better. And a lot of that is organizations don't know it's a problem. I worked with many organizations where they're excellent at this. So this is something that's a little bit more of a recent focus and something that's definitely an opportunity for Ripon to work on to prepare for when management turnover does happen again. And then lastly, something that really struck me when I left the public sector, if you remember from when I was there last month, I shared that I'd worked in local government for 10 years before I started my own business. And if you work in the private sector, maybe as an elected official, you can relate to this. Billable time, it's just sort of this concept that doesn't resonate with us in the public sector because, you're either salaried or hourly. It really resonated with me personally how much time it actually took me to do a task until I switched to owning a business and really operating in the world of billable tasks. So now I could tell you exactly how long every single task I do takes me. Wrapped around. And where this is a problem is that you don't have a cost argument to do things differently that you can clearly understand. So if you were to tell me in my business, if you implement this new piece of software, it'll save you 6 hours on processes or change things to be more efficient, because you don't have a clear argument to say, we'll save money doing this. I'm not suggesting that Ripon needs to switch to a billable model, but there are ways to better calculate and be aware of what the real cost is. Even though your employee value and an hour spent doing a low value task for an employee that only works 40 hours a week, is not really worth the same as an hour doing a high value task. Opportunities is the next section in this report. And this talks about ways that strategies that we heard elected officials or staff say I wish we could do this, or I wish we could change this. Or there are things that we've seen in other communities that directly relate to some of the weaknesses that you had. So some of these related to development. I'm going to focus on the external. Obviously, it's a need everywhere in Northeast Wisconsin right now. And then internally, talked about creating ways to reduce distractions in the workplace, make sure that employees are more focused at work, and reduce the isolation of the utility department. Leasing communications have that same voice, and that information is presented in a clear and accessible way for the public. Also, reducing the need for each department to manage their own communications, which, as communications have evolved, social media platforms have evolved, the way people get their information, most organizations initially budgeted for. We also saw some requests for changing the way city council process and procedures work. You know, you'll see later in the report, we talk about switching, providing greater training to empower elected officials when they come onto the council, and allowing that ability to have public involvement. You know, by the time someone comes to a city council meeting, the issue might have already sort of been discussed, workshopped at the committee level. More transparency and opportunity for the public to engage, as well as for those council members who maybe are not on a specific committee to be involved in it before a decision is reached. Lastly, people often ask what the difference is between weaknesses and threats. The way I separate there will be a problem within the next 2 years. Threats are a little bit more like smoke versus fire. So it's something that is on the back burner right now. You see it simmering, and you know that if you don't do something, that pot might boil over, but it's something that you can wait on for right now. Some of the threats that we saw were limited interest in running for elected office. You know, we saw that there were some non-contested seats in past elections. A little bit of skepticism toward change, which is changing as the organization has turnover, you know, kind of fighting that we've always done it this way culture, and service delivery having some outdated approaches. You know, there could be some changes done to kind of make your organization more effective with who does what roles, or changing your org chart slightly, which is something that Adam and I discussed at length outside of this report, and I believe he might share with you in the future. So that's it for the SWOT analysis. I'm going to move now into the organizational health section. So this section is really sort of like, you know, your doctor summary of your visit. This is why we kind of lean into that health check word. So I do workplace cultures because I'm someone that left, quite frankly, a not great workplace culture. You know, I wanted to stay working in local government, and I was just in an organization where I couldn't grow anymore. And I've kind of made it my life's work to help organizations be better, because I and keep them happy and engaged and innovative. I believe that that's what's best for our tax-paying citizens as well. So with that, I am fascinated by this area of literature and wanted to create this tool that would provide elected of how their organization ranked in different areas of organizational health. You know, you could ask 20 different employees and say, do you think this is a healthy organization? And they might have 20 different answers because they're answering it based on different perspectives, different departments, or how they, you know, a vegetable stew, if you will, of different components that make up a healthy organization. And those indicator areas are organizational alignment. This is having a shared mission, vision. Everyone's on, takes out half of the organization. You have everything documented in a way that people could pick up the pieces and continue to run the organization. Employee well-being, which has to do with folks being energetic, focused, happy to be at work. They have work emotionally inside and outside of work so that their whole person is healthier. Organizational fairness, you know, being transparent about wages, having fair standards that are applied unilaterally for wages, employee benefits, etc. Meaningful work, which you would hope would be kind of a given in government, but making sure that people understand why the work they do is important, keeping them motivated, retaining your employees, which also has a cost savings, and then boosting employee morale through recognition. And then lastly, innovation and resilience. You know, this one is a little bit harder to define, but it's been so clear post are facing so many threats from different directions, be it cybersecurity, working with lower FTE because you're unable to hire for different roles, or seeing turnover generationally and they're just not being the people to hire, not having housing, relocate to work in your organization. So many challenges that really weren't a thing 10 years ago and now are so normalized. So how can your organization stay resilient so it can keep operating despite these challenges? Because we don't see these challenges. Organizations that are innovative to solve problems and which are resilient is tied to better employee well-being, which again is tied to these other elements. So even though there's 6 distinctive areas that are scored here, they are all interconnected because happy your employees and employees that are healthier, focused, energetic at work, they're going to solve problems and deliver better customer service, which again is what it all comes back to, delivering great service to residents and being responsible with tax dollars. So when we gave Ripon a score, we did each section out of 5. And don't worry, there were no zeros, but there weren't all 5s either. There's definitely room for improvement. The areas where Ripon is doing really well, I want to acknowledge that for sure, were organizational alignment and meaningful work. And that came across so clearly to me during the mission, vision, and values workshops that were facilitated with evening. It was so clear to me how on the same page all parties were. A lot of times when I split those into 2 workshops, I have to do a lot of like Frankenstein engineering to try to get everyone on the same page. I didn't have to do this here because it was so clear that people really came in on the same page and they had that same shared sense of why for the organization, which is such a critical first piece of having a strong workplace culture. The same extends to meaningful work. People that I talk to really connect with the work they do. They think it's important. They understand the importance. Areas where you're doing, 3 out of 5, so you're doing better than you're doing worse, but there's still room to improve. Employee well-being and organizational fairness. We heard these themes of folks saying they can't get their job done in 40 hours. They're frustrated. Concerns about how employee handbook policies are implemented, if wage parity and fairness is really there. Those are things that can be worked on. The areas where there's a need for the most work, innovation and resilience is one of them. I don't want you to beat yourself up too much about this because honestly, there's not a single organization that has come out of the pandemic and said well, that was a breeze. We totally were prepared to handle that and to change our government service delivery for 2 years. It took everyone off guard, and the near constant cybersecurity pressures and threats of hacks and things taking down government infrastructure, that had not existed to the level that it has post 2020. So I think most organizations would score a 3 or lower on this right now, but I need to be honest about the fact that this is an area where I'm worried if you don't start thinking about it strategically, you're going to be caught off guard in the next situation, whether it's, the next pandemic or the next cybersecurity threat that happens, especially now that staffing is more of an issue. You're always going to be operating with a leaner staff from now on. The workforce has just shrunk dramatically post 2020. So clear processes and workflows. This is something that came out of the turnover that happened at your management level. You've got a phenomenal team of department heads now hired and up and running. Some are newer than others to the organization, but making sure that they make decisions, finding those inefficiencies, and ensuring that when turnover happens again, you don't have quite that learning curve for your next generation of management. So there are some recommendations on what the organization could do in each area. We have organizational health. And then the last section we call our prescriptions. We're really committing to the bit on the medical thing with this. So I've kind of divided these into 3 sections. The ones that require budgetary support, so this means you're going to have to spend a little bit of money on this. The ones that require policy support, where council would need to take form, make a change to the way things operate. And then lastly, management action. And this is the largest section. So this is the section that really, it might have a little bit to do with council if it requires the creation of new positions to meet these goals, but it just means let's healthier workplace. So that is it for the civic health check report. I'm going to go pretty quickly through the mission and vision section, and then I'm happy to entertain questions, comments, etc. So you'll recall that during our workshops on October, the reason that you'll see 2 diagrams for each of these sections is because I did the workshop with staff in the afternoon and then the same workshop in the evening. The outcomes are very similar, but I wanted to respect the fact that they were slightly different, so I've separated those out. These are broken out in black for the employees that participate in the afternoon session and in red for the department heads and city council members. And you can see that there's definitely some alignment in those terms, kind of different words for the same things, like honesty is on city council and department head values, trustworthy is on employee core values, dependable and accountable are pretty similar. So definitely heading in the same direction. On the next page, you can see our vision. And this is what we asked you to define, where we said, if you had unlimited resources, unlimited staff, City of Ripon. So it is setting kind of a lofty goal that maybe is never fully achievable, but remember, we're just aiming for something that would be super impactful for the city. You can see in red during the department head and city council session, we heard themes of a great employer for the city, growing community with more housing, socially connected, and a high functioning government. Really similar ones in black for the staff workshop, high quality of life, having the having to do their jobs well, maintaining those city assets, economic growth, housing, socially connected, and then the city being a better place to work. So you can see really, I didn't have to do a lot of editing. Those were super well aligned. So from there, we have contributions and distinctions, and that was where we left it. I took that all home and I sent out a follow-up survey where I had taken the components from the 2 workshops. We had some very long lists generated, which I've included in the appendix of this report. And I sent out that follow-up survey with Adam's help earlier this month. Actually, I believe it was later October. And gave you a couple sample mission and vision statements. Thankfully for me, overwhelmingly, folks had an opinion, and it was very clear which ones resonated with. So the vision statement that had a lot of support read, in Ripon, our business and community members thrive. We are driven by our motivation to take care of our community assets, our employees, our local business community, and of the needs of our fellow community members. Supported by 47% of the folks that took the survey. So overwhelmingly, it had the most, it resonated with the most people. So again, your vision statement is meant to be a little bit more internally focused, and it's really just saying, like, this is what we want to achieve, this is our why. The mission statement is going to be something that you need to be able to implement. So it shouldn't be lofty, it should be something you can actually deliver on. This one had even more support, so I'm going to read it now. The mission statement. The City of Ripon invites businesses, residents, and customers to be a part of our strong community networks. We are proud to provide exceptional community spaces, public safety, municipal services, and community programs to all Riponites. So again, workshops that you had extremely similar ideas of what those audiences, services, and distinctions were, and the mission and vision alignment was really clear to me, which in part led to a higher score on your community health scores. So that wraps up my summary of the report. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on specific components of the report, or if you had a concern that maybe something was not reflected accurately.
Anyone have questions for Allison? Well, Allison, it looks like, we do have one. Jolene?
Allison, this is Jolene Schatzinger. I wanted to say I really enjoy my time connecting with you, and I am just so grateful and impressed there. You know, we have a concern about this, or we are concerned about this, or we're grateful for this, and to really make it into actionable items and things that we can now move forward on. I'm just really, really impressed with this. So I wanted to thank you for the time and effort you took. It's very clear. one of the reasons I joined City Council was to encourage more people to have their voices heard and engage in public service. And on page 8, under the threats, you provide an opportunity, you provided a suggestion perhaps, that residents create grassroots advocates and generate interest in public service opportunities. Is that something that you can share more about something like what that would look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to give credit where credit's due. Adam already put that little bug in my ear before I got into this. So that was something that I had already heard about. So this is kind of in places for a while, but there's actually a lot of really great examples in Wisconsin. One of them most notably is in the city of River Falls in western Wisconsin. They have a really phenomenal example of this. So you might be familiar with police academies. Those were particularly popular within the and generate better citizen connections with local police departments. Communities are realizing that citizens, while they may be pretty clueless about how policing works, they're probably even more clueless about how things like, the budget office works. You're basically creating a class where maybe on a once-a-month basis, a select leadership panel of citizens comes in. I think the closest thing you might have to this would be like a leadership Fond du Lac County or a leadership Oshkosh, something like that. But they would come in and they would basically learn for maybe an hour a month about how a department or function works. So it might include some more interactive activities like, we get to do like a ride along in a dump truck or something, or we get to understand how the street paving program works or get a tour of the utilities. But it's meant to kind of create interest and education for folks on your local government, and through that generate better community ambassadors. So if you have somebody who understands how those city operations function, they're more likely to maybe correct misinformation if someone is misinformed about how something works, or maybe they're going to volunteer to join a committee, or even be more likely to run for city council. So it's kind of a way to put out like a Batman signal to your community government nerds in your community, so that they come in and they say, yes, we've been waiting for this. We've been wanting to learn about the ins and outs of Ripon. And that's how you're going to attract and grow that next generation of leadership. But Ripon has River Falls has shared really extensively their sort of secret sauce on how they developed their academy. And it has been super successful in terms of people coming out of that academy and running for city council. So it's actually had this really great statistical track record of attracting interested, civically minded folks and really creating that leadership pipeline. And I don't know if Adam heard about this the same way I did, but at the Wisconsin City County Management Association conference this year, River Falls did a phenomenal job of sharing all the details of their program. I'd be happy to email you some of that
Conversation, because I think that our city is only stronger when more people engage. And people still continue to ask me, and I'm glad for it, how they don't realize that even public comment, even though we feature it at every meeting, clearly they feel unsure about something like that. So personal one-on-one meeting with you, but when I first joined about 4 years ago, I had heard some models about youth engaging in city council, maybe even at committees or sitting on, maybe not being a full voting member, but getting able successfully of cities utilizing a youth representative.
Yes and no. If I'm going to be 100% honest, most communities I worked in, Parks and Recreation Committee, for some reason people seem to think if you're a kid you just have absolutely no useful input other than Parks and Recreation. But there are models where it's non-voting. I can't off the top of my head models in communities where they have a partnership with the high school. Sometimes it's with the 12th grade civics class where they have student representatives. So you're having kind of your superstar overachievers in the high school anyways. Maybe they're involved in student government, engaged with city council or city committees.
Awesome, thank you. And then my very last question is, and I want to point out that I just love, often we think that Ripon is a welcoming community. You marked it as the first strength here. And I think even more so, I did not size smaller cities. I think often we think it's our size, and that other cities are like this, but I really feel proud that you identified that strength because it's something that I felt living here, and it feels good to have that validated, that it's actually stronger compared to other cities our same size. So that is so wonderful to hear. Thanks again for your work in this. My last question for you would be, do you work with cities, and after this is our survey, is there any other follow-up, a year from like this, that you continue to work with cities, and how might that look?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know I told Adam he wasn't going to get rid of me yet because I just love Ripon. It's one of my favorite communities to come visit. So I do check in regularly. It really takes more of the form of me just checking in with your administrator and understanding, what's going on. Is there anything you want to bounce off somebody? Do you want to talk through maybe a change that's happened? So I'm definitely going to stay in touch with Adam, and I would really defer to his managerial experience and your city council to see if you have a need in the future. I certainly hope that I'll have the opportunity to work with Ripon again, because it's been a real pleasure getting to know each of you on city council and get to know your department heads.
Thank you.
Doug?
Just a quick comment, Allison. I was a bit skeptical of this whole consulting thing at first, but after I saw the materials and I talked with you, and I realized you knew a great deal of what questions to ask to get answers, to get us to talk about our strengths and our weaknesses and our opportunities and our threat. And I, for one, saw some of these weaknesses that we had, but you've uncovered other ones too that we need to work on as a local government unit and as a community, so that we can be better, I guess, and really work through and use what we got as best we can. So I really thank you for the time that you spent with us, and which I think is probably everybody else in the state.
Well, thank you. I love when I get people like you. I wish I could write like a whole section that says like, I was skeptical of consultants, but ...
Anyone else have any questions? No? All right.
I'll just comment. So thank you, Allison. So this obviously is a pretty hefty document. There's a lot in it, a lot about processes. Ultimately, there's a lot of good recommendations in here that we will begin working through. Some of them more immediately than others. Some of them are certainly easier to say committee of a whole, organizational structure positions as we see transitions or retirements, how we fill positions or how we create maybe new positions, maybe as necessary as some of the things that are recommended in here. Ultimately, it's been it's my first time doing anything like this, and although there's always fear about kind of talking through issues, I feel that the end result here certainly puts us on a solid path, or gives us some really good information and ideas to be better as a organization for our employees, as a community for our residents, so on and so forth. So wham, change overnight. Allison and I will continue to talk about what are other steps that we can take. I told her I would like in some capacity to maybe bring her back next year to work through some things. But ultimately, some of these have price tags as well, so we have to be conscious about that. Some of the things in here, but overall provides a nice kind of work plan or blueprint for us. I would ask that we consider adopting the mission and vision and value statements to give us kind of the overriding message that I think staff really are looking for. As simple and as kind of broad as they are, they sort of hit a lot of things we're working on, or a lot of things we're doing, as well as kind of set the appropriate tone for our organization to have a callback to when and/or communicating out to the public, what is our mission? What are we focused on? And why does that matter? So that's all I have. I thank you, Allison, again, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a good night.
Hold on. You're not off the hook. This information has been shared along with all of the council. They have seen this. It was shared publicly, as part of this document as well. So it has been out there available for, review, consideration, and yeah.
So have we had any feedback from the employees on this as well?
Not a ton of, department heads have just kind of come forward and said, I think the nature of this whole process was to engage people and collect information. And there hasn't been anything that anybody has come to me and said, that is way off base, right? Because I think it's truly reflective of the opinions and the conversations that were had. So while some of the issues may not be as apparent or present within a certain department, they may say, oh, well, I don't agree that I'm distracted at work, right? Somebody may not say that. Well, there's still people that have said, well, maybe there's distractions or there's ways we can limit them. So there's examples of those. Ultimately, I think it resonates differently with everybody based on their experience and based on, what their values or what they ultimately feel and they discussed. But we haven't had a outright revolt from anybody saying this is absolutely not appropriate or you're missing the target on any of this. I think this process has been very open for employees to, no one's been shut out of an opportunity to provide an opinion. So I would say that the feedback has been generally back to me from department heads very positive, and frankly, I think that ultimately is healthy for this organization and community.
Thank you.
Any other comments before we let Allison go? All right, well, Allison, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you very much. I hope you have a nice night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Adam, were you looking for approval of these statements tonight or at a future time?
Tonight or whenever the council so chooses, if they would like to.
I move to adopt the vision statement as presented tonight. And I will read that, or presented in the analysis from Allison, which is assets, our employees, our local business community, and of the needs of fellow community members.
And then there is the other one as well.
I thought about taking them separate, but I couldn't. I'm happy to do it.
Do them together.
As the city of Ripon invites businesses, residents, and customers to be a part of our strong community networks. We are proud to provide exceptional community spaces, public safety, municipal services, and community programs to all Riponites.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll make a second.
Moved by Jolene, seconded by Doug. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the mission statement and vision statement, I believe is what they're calling the first one. Yeah, vision statement and mission statement. Say aye.
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 Opposed? Those are approved. Very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to our next item is the resolution schedule. Been a issue most recently brought forward by John Split, but several community members as well. It's pretty straightforward that we're just consider a different time for testing. We're we put a suggested time in here or just request?
Monday at noon.
Monday at Monday.
Yeah,
Okay.
possibly, but.
Yeah, there it is, Monday at noon. Any discussions or motions?
I'd like to comment that I get how we would like to do it on Monday because of, let's say, downtown businesses and so forth. Or if we do it on a Monday, you do have the siren right by the middle school, high school, which can be disruptive. So it's just a comment I'm going to make. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer to this. In my mind, we need to be prepared. That's what the purpose of this siren is for. So doing it any particular time, you know.
I would make the response that in most larger communities I'm familiar with, like Milwaukee area, Green Bay, Appleton, most of them are on Wednesday at noon.
I know when I grew up in Cudahy, which was part of Milwaukee County, we didn't even have one.
In looking into this issue, because I wanted to understand better why the suggestion, I understand that the siren traditionally, or years ago, did not run for so long. And now, because of our current system, the technology, and I do time it, it is a minimum often of 3 minutes, and that 3 minutes is, I believe it was maybe, 30 seconds or a minute in the past. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I guess I understand that it has become more of a nuisance. Some might ask, why now after, maybe 50 years of one way? But that's my understanding, correct? That it has become longer.
Yes, in the transition from testing them locally to now testing at the county level, the county process does go on much longer than the local test did. When it was the local test, 30 seconds was typical, which is enough time for the horn to spin once, maybe a little more than one full revolution, so it only, the one downtown faced down Watson Street for a few seconds. Now it's several minutes. And looking at people on Watson Street when it's going off, I remember I believe it was Septemberfest when there were 4-year-old kids just screaming with their hands over their ears because they couldn't get out of the blast. And just for a point of reference, this Saturday I was on my roof, which is on Watson Street, level with the horn. It's quieter level with the horn on the roof than it is on the street, so it does have the tunneling effect on that street.
And then, so thank you for explaining why this has become, in more recent time, a bigger issue than in the past. And then, so I think, for me, where I'm located, I often hear it from the siren here. My colleague just said there's a siren near the school.
Yes.
So where's the other sirens? Where are all the sirens located?
There's one by the high school, middle school. There's one on the corner of Union and Fond du Lac by that park there at the wayside. And there's one more, where's the last one?
Bill knows.
In addition to those that the mayor just mentioned, there's one located at the corner of Oshkosh and Vermont, the one here, and then there's another one on the water tower on Thomas Street.
And I guess since you're standing here, I mean, clearly the big concern would be if we feel like this compromises safety, but at the end of the day, we're still saying we want a weekly test. And so you, as the police chief, would say that you don't think if we were to move it, as long as we continue to do a weekly testing, you don't see any compromise of safety. Would that be correct?
Well, when you start talking about moving a siren, you have to through this discussion, we actually did a sound study to determine, because we're in a process, if you remember during the budget time, we talked about replacing one of the sirens because several of them are from the 50s, they're old sirens. So part of that was getting a sound test done, a study done to determine where these are located, what's the coverage like, if we were to eliminate one, what would that look like? So you have to be a little bit careful about moving sirens. So we had some discussions specifically about this siren because this is the one that's causing the concern about the possibility of moving that to a different location, but you can't move it very far. And, you know, when you start talking about moving it, then, you know, if you move it to another location, are you just moving the problem? What are you doing? So, but ultimately, the sound study dictates how far you can move it, if you choose to move it, where you can move it. You know, Ripon's a little unique because it's not a flat community. A lot of times we think of it like that, but it's not. So you have things that affect the sound, and that's why they're placed in certain locations to get that coverage. Let's just face it, when sirens were installed, you know, began being used in the 40s and 50s for a variety of reasons. Really, at this point, it's outdated technology. So many of us get those emergency messages through our cell phones and those type of things, but we still need to have that community awareness in case that backup system in case those other things go down. It's designed for those people that are outdoors, to notify them to take shelter. That's what the siren system is designed for. It's not designed for you and your house. We're hoping that you get those alerts based on other things, whether it's the alerts from your cell phone, the TV, the radio, whatever. The siren system is based to alert outside people to seek shelter when that storm is involved, so, or situation is involved. But there's a lot of things that go into where those sirens are placed. It's just not, we just don't arbitrarily let's just put one here. So a lot of it has to do with that sound study and where they're placed.
And I think, for clarification, I think she was more talking about moving the schedule and not the physical.
Okay.
I was, but then I was really glad you went into that because that was an interesting, you know, conversation.
Yeah, so the scheduling is based on the county's schedule. We've had conversations with them about changing it. They have not been receptive to that. Some of the response has been, well, that's the way it's always been done, so that's why we're doing it on Saturdays at noon. If we change it for Ripon, because of the system they use, and you talked a little bit about the length of the siren being an issue, that changed since we transferred dispatch, because it's all on one system. So when they set these sirens off here, they also are setting off sirens throughout every community in the county. So in order for us to change to a different day, that means every other community is going to change as well, or need to change. They can't isolate us to do that testing separately. The technology that they're using for setting off the sirens has changed because that's based on the weather service and GPS locations on where that warning is in effect. So they may, you know, in the past, it would be for the county under the old system, if there was a tornado warning in Campbellsport, the siren here would go off. Now they don't do that because it's based on that National Weather Service where they can set off particular, but the National Weather Service takes care of that based on the geographical location of GPS when that warning is put into effect, when that warning block goes in. For testing, though, it's a different thing. That has to be done through the system. And the reason it takes so long is because they may start with Ripon, but then Brandon goes off, Fairwater goes off, and basically every community goes off until they come back to Ripon to turn ours off. Then they turn off the next one or next one. So they all go off, and then it starts a cycle again to turn them off. They don't all go on at the same time and turn off at the same time. It's a cycle that occurs. That's why it takes that length of time to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I've been in other communities and I can understand what they're talking about as far as the have to test your sirens. But it seems like everybody else's community, the siren doesn't last as long.
It's because they're using a different system. Or they have control.
So Brandon has a different system than we do?
Oh, no.
And their
I thought
horn
you were-
doesn't
I
go
thought-
as long as ours does.
No,
And that's the only question I have on that.
I thought you were talking about communities
no.
outside of Fond du Lac County.
I'm talking about the timing, how long it takes.
Okay.
And like I say, the smaller communities, theirs goes on, goes off. I've been there. and ours goes on and on and on.
Yeah, I've not heard that
And I think
issue.
our horn is actually louder than most of them. So that would be the only concern about consumers that are downtown and stuff. So,
Yeah, we did approach them, have discussions about the possibility of changing it. That, that discussion did not go very long. We had some other discussions between Adam and myself about addressing the issue, whether that's moving it, whether that's removing this one,
oh, you don't want to do that.
and still having the sound coverage if we're able to do that, to install some type of blockage to prevent it from going down. So we've had multiple discussions about multiple things and things to look at, but this is where you're at now with this resolution.
And this resolution would give a little more weight to the conversation. It would say that the city as a council would like to have a conversation as opposed to just,
And I think it also signals that the complaints that you're getting are continuing.
yeah.
That sends that message.
Being a business owner downtown, I see people after it goes off, and I get complaints every week.
Have we talked to other communities besides the city of Fond du Lac?
We actually just had a discussion about reaching out today to see where they're at.
I mean, I think it'd carry a lot more weight if we could get several more communities
We've
do this.
We've talked about that, and that's part of this whole conversation is this is going to be shared with, we're not saying that everybody has to jump on board with it, but from our conversations, I believe what I heard was there are other communities that are not liking the current practice.
Okay. So what this resolution will do is officially state that Ripon would like to move it.
Right now, the conversation has basically been myself and the police chief going to the county, asking them, and them saying, basically, no, thank you. We've gotten it as far as we can.
Okay.
Without some further action, and ultimately, this wouldn't be in front of you if there wasn't a large amount of complaints coming in, particularly from our downtown business community, our Main Street organization, who, if you have ever been downtown on a Saturday at noon, you have shop owners running to close their doors. You have visitors taking shelter inside of stores, like just running to the closest store. I have video of people literally walking in our downtown plugging their ears. It is not a welcoming or attractive environment at arguably the most important time of the week for our downtown. You then have events that occur. Christmas in the Village happened a couple weeks ago. The whistle went off at 11 o'clock and noon, twice, okay? On our most busy day downtown. So that is why it's been brought in front of you. Alderperson Split brought it to me after he has received, he can speak to it, to complaints. We have shared this with the Main Street. We have shared this with the county emergency manager as well to give them heads up that this is going to be talked about. But ultimately, Bill and I, in talking, we kind of got to a point where if the complaints are coming and there's no action or no response from the county level, and the council and our business community and our Main Street and the mayor and everybody are continuing to get complaints, what is the next step? That is why this is in front of you.
John, then Terry, and Doug.
I just want to thank Adam for putting this on the agenda. I think it's important, and I do hope that other communities see this and go along with it. I will say, it's not only the downtown people complaining. I just had some guests at our Airbnb, came in from out of town, went downtown and asked, what's up with the siren? So it's people coming into our community that don't like it. Now, will they come again? I'm sure they would, but maybe not if that bothers them. So it's a huge problem. It really is.
Terry?
But thank you, Adam.
I like the way this is written with the fact that we talk about that the visitors and business owners are having problems with the timing and volume of testing. But I would also recommend that we add duration of the test. Or, you know, it's a big thing with the duration.
Yeah.
It is just way too long. So, I mean, if they could streamline it, that they could, you know, get the duration down, I think that would make a lot more people happy as well.
I don't disagree that we could word this many different ways. Ultimately, we're just trying to start a conversation. We could talk about not just duration, but frequency. Instead of doing it every Saturday, why not one Saturday? That would be a huge victory for us at this point. So at the end of the day, we certainly can add duration or anything to this that you would like. At the end of the day, I think we're just trying to get to the same point of even if you do it on Saturday at noon and it's 30 seconds instead of 3 minutes, it's still a problem. It's still the worst time for our community to have this happen.
Doug?
Have we talked to our county supervisors about this yet?
We went straight to the top, the county executive as well as the emergency management director.
So we haven't talked to our Blue Cross supervisors then on this?
Yeah, I don't know how that conversation based on the organization the county is. We went to the individuals that we work directly with at an administrative level. Bill's on a communications board that's managed by the emergency management director. So we went to those individuals first.
Okay, all right, I did, yeah. Okay, I was just wondering, if you need anything, let me know. I'll be more than happy to help press this issue. It is loud and annoying, and I cannot believe they can't come up with another standard, another different kind of test. They just don't want to change, and I'm sick of hearing about this the way it's always been done. Because I don't think it really needs to be done like that.
Julie?
I just wanted to say that, having Steve say that you've been to Brandon, and I don't know if it was as recently, that it is shorter, but I mean, I do think that, and science would tell us when it comes to hearing the longevity of time you're exposed to a loud noise, that can be more damaging than a shorter time. So I am in favor of passing this resolution, and I do like the idea of Terry, of adding duration. It could be right in that area. See numerous complaints regarding the duration, timing, and volume of just adding that one word, so that they know if that's something that they can look into. It helps, I think, have that conversation at the county to look into it.
That's where I was going to add the word as well, so.
I don't think it particularly matters the wording, because I think Adam and Ted, the mayor, is correct. It's going to take all the communities in the county that are sick and tired of the city of Fond du Lac, the village of North Fond du Lac. We're all going to have to get together, work together, and say, we're sick and tired of the way the sirens are working, the length, the duration. They should be able to come up with a better plan than what they have. I can't believe they can't. Technologically, they got to be able to decide to do something different. And so I think it's fine. We just got to get it going.
And the way
if you want to change the wording, that's fine, but I think it's going to take a lot of pressure.
The way I see this working is Monday at noon is a suggestion, but passing this resolution is just the hammer to knock on their door with, as opposed to just a little tap. We're going to be pounding on their door with a hammer now, saying that we want a change. What that change is possibly is Monday at noon, but we need a change. Let's have a discussion. Would anyone like to?
Ted?
Oh, yes, go ahead, Ellen.
Ted? I would like to move that we accept the resolution requesting the adjustment of the county-wide siren testing schedule.
To include that change in the last whereas regarding the timing, duration, and volume. Is that acceptable?
That's fine.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ellen, seconded by John. Ellen, did you have more comments or just the motion?
Just the motion.
Thank you. Steve?
Just a comment, I don't think you can change the volume of the sirens. They're gonna always be the same sound. So we're just changing the,
If they modify the system, they could, but it's
well, we don't want to do
further
that.
out.
Yeah.
I would
The sound is the
imagine,
sound. The sound is the siren.
I would imagine, Bill, that the new sirens would have the technology to alter volume, but not the current ones.
I don't believe that there's an opportunity to adjust the volume.
On even the new ones.
Yeah, I do not believe so. I can't say for 100% certainty on that. I guess I've never asked the question, but I would be very skeptical.
And we're not going to
believe
run out
that.
and change all 4 sirens at the same time.
No.
No, I mean, to replace a siren, it's about $25,000. So we're talking if the alternative, if they say no and we want to address this, it's going to cost our community north of $50,000. At this point in time where the siren on top of City Hall does not one that needs to be replaced immediately. So there's real dollars behind this as well.
I know that there was a comment made that it would also be a win in people's minds or a person's mind if we did not do it weekly. I will say that I support this resolution fully with the change, and I also sincerely hope that I don't see it as a benefit of, as having it, once a year. I think that would be dangerous in my mind, the way I understand it.
I don't think that's
No,
not the
I don't
goal.
think that's the plan either. I know I can speak historically, when we had our own dispatch center, we would conclude tested it all during the winter months, and then when spring came, we would resume testing. Usually around the daylight savings times is when we would stop and then begin it again. But moving to the county, they test them all year long.
Doug?
Chief, this is kind of arbitrary in the county, we're gonna test once, so.
Yeah, they're in
Once a
control.
week, all year round,
Yeah.
for reasons that only they know?
Yeah, it's been their standard. Their standard was different from ours prior to us moving over there.
This is like that.
Yes.
Okay, this even makes me more angry. Okay, because if there was a national standard that you gotta test them
Yeah.
for 2 minutes
I don't
every
know if there
Saturday at
is.
noon, that's a law, it's a statute, you gotta do it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way it is.
I don't
But
know
it's
if-
not.
Yes, and I don't know if there is a standard.
I don't think there is.
Okay. Well, I don't.
John?
Okay. If we do pass this, where does this resolution go to, or who does it go to in Fond du Lac? And second, do we need to, I know you're a busy person, but do we need, or somebody else need to contact Brandon and Fairwater?
Yeah, so where it'll go from here is we'll send it to the people listed on here. I will also send it off to the administrators that I work with in the
Okay.
other communities and just say, this was passed, I was directed to forward it on to communities, and just start a conversation, frankly. So I don't have a problem sharing it with other communities and having those conversations. I speak with the administrators in the county rather regularly, so it wouldn't be much of a task to talk to them.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Iverson,
Yes.
Schatzinger,
Yes.
Reamer,
Yes.
Gallops,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Sorensen,
Yes.
Split,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you very much. All right, I see Chief has stayed nearby. Our next item is ordinance creating Chapter 12.80, Sex Offender Child Safety Zones. Go ahead, Chief.
Sure, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about this topic tonight. Just wanted to provide you with a little bit of background here, historically where we've been as a community and as a department on this issue, and what's kind of gotten us to this point tonight where we want to have this discussion with you. So just a little history here and just education-wise. So a little explanation of the sex offender registry system. So as many of you know, when a subject is convicted of a crime against a child or other sexual related offenses, there's a list of them. Most of those are included within the ordinance. those subjects may be subject to being placed on the Wisconsin Sex Offender Registry. Those registry, or those people that are on the registry, are often those that have been convicted, possibly have served time in an institution, and then released back into the community after that time has been served. The monitoring of those subjects, the level in which they're monitored, usually depends on several things. It depends on what they were convicted of, the charge, the conviction, the sentence that they were given, if they're released on active supervision with probation and parole once they come out of the institution. And that level of monitoring can range everywhere from being on active supervision, where they're on with a probation agent or with the sex offender registry, to just being placed onto the registry itself with no active supervision, or it can range all the way to being GPS monitored for life, depending on the offense. Many of those people that are released, those offenders are under the supervision of the Department of Corrections, or DOC, when they're released from those institutions. If all goes well during that time, sometimes we can see a change in the level of monitoring that occurs with them based on what happens once they're released. Historically, our position on this and the sex offender registry, we've been very supportive of DOC in regards to sex offenders and their release back to the community. We have a great relationship with the sex offender registry manager for our area. I have contact with her frequently, and we've always felt that by working with the Department of Corrections Sex Offender Registry, we're able to have accurate records and addresses for offenders that we can that can be accessed by the public on the state sex offender registry website. Say that 10 times fast. So we've got a very good relationship with them. Oftentimes when it comes time, usually once a year, when it comes time to update addresses, we provide her with a location here at the police department. She comes in, meets with those people, updates their address information, updates their photographs, whatever needs to be done. So we've got a really good working relationship with her, and I talk to her often. We understand, we've understood in the past the need for support of these individuals once they're released from institutions, that they come back and are released into our community, especially if their support system is local when they're released, okay? We understand that. We've never been opposed to the release of those subjects if their conviction was a result of an offense that occurred within our community or even within Fond du Lac County, okay? So historically, that's kind of where we stood. So what got us to this point? Well, because we've been willing to work with those offenders that are released back into the community, local offenders from our area, we've begun to see that that willingness has been abused and taken advantage of by other jurisdictions and other DOC offices across the state. Sex offenders from other jurisdictions are being released into our community because of the restrictions in other areas or their communities preventing them from being released there. We're seeing offenders released into our community because of a lack of our ordinance controlling where they can reside. When those communities and those counties around us have enacted ordinances that prevent their release back to their original jurisdiction community. Basically, they see Ripon as an opportunity for placement. Okay. We're also seeing new crimes and violations committed by those offenders that are released into our community. Specifically, those residing in one of our hotels as housing. In each of the last 4 years, we've had offenses against children, most often child pornography charges for these subjects. This is often a product of them living month to month in a hotel, having access to internet or Wi-Fi at those locations, and engaging in new offenses. So what got us to the breaking point here of us having this discussion tonight? I've expressed my concern with Department of Corrections frequently over the past several years about what was happening with the release of sex offenders from other jurisdictions into our community. I continued to warn them that if they were going to push our community into a corner on this issue if that continued. For me, that finally happened a couple weeks ago. I was contacted by Department of Corrections supervisor from Fond du Lac and advised that Department of Corrections from Marathon County, which is near Wausau, was looking to place a newly released sex offender with a substantial history of sex offenses against children into our community. This offender was attempted to be placed in another county, but was unable to be placed there because of law enforcement and community concerns, so they were looking at Ripon. Because in her words, the word is out that you can place them in Ripon because of a lack of an ordinance preventing that. This particular offender would be living in one of our local motels, traveling an hour one way for employment, but needed to be placed here in their words. I immediately responded in the strongest way that I could, that I was opposed to this placement and would go public with the placement and do everything I could to prevent that from happening. Thankfully, they reconsidered based on our conversation. But I'm not willing to allow this to continue or fight this battle continually without the backing of an ordinance that would support that position and protect our community. So moving forward, I think what this ordinance is designed to do is that purpose, protect our most vulnerable people in our community, our kids. It's important to note that this ordinance does not affect the residency of those persons currently residing in our community unless they change the address or location after the passing of the ordinance, if you choose to do that. It only affects the location of a new address by an offender. This signifies, in my opinion, a move to prevent the dumping of sex offenders from other areas of the state into our community. It reduces the risk of repeat offenses by limiting residency by month-to-month leases in local hotels. It limits the access to certain areas of those persons that are registered sex offenders, such as parks or places for gatherings of. I just want to make sure that it's important to note that the ordinance does allow some exceptions to specific locations by requiring that offender to gain permission to be present, such as churches or school events, even if they have school events if they have a child participating in those events. I have had conversations with the school district. They reviewed the ordinance and they're already practicing some of the elements that this ordinance already has in their policy. So they're already doing some of the things that are outlined within the policy, such as sex offenders gaining permission from them to attend school events. It's unfortunate that we have to have this discussion such as this, but in moving forward, I think it becomes an important tool to protect our community. Certainly, I'll answer any questions that you have. Some of the questions that have been given to us is what does that 1,000-foot safety zone look like? I know you had a copy in your outline, but I'm not sure it was in color or easily recognizable. This map that you see up here in front of you gives a better understanding of what those safety zones look like within our community. So everything covered in pink there would be a zone that would be excluded for residency within our community. The only altering of that map would be, if you go back for a second, Adam, in the far, that corner up there with Ripon Community Church moving now to 1 Westgate on our west side, that corner would probably be covered in entirety there based on the 1,000-foot rule from a church. So that would be the only change within that map. The ordinance also allows or talks about, so in our discussions between myself, city administrator, and the city council, or city attorney Wirtz, we had some concerns and some questions about essentially the first draft of this, and many of the other communities around us that are using the 1,000-foot safety zone are excluding those on the registry from being in those locations within that 1,000 feet. That's not what we're doing here. We're looking at preventing them from being within 100 feet of those specific locations that we've outlined, those places where youth are going to be gathering, rather than that 1,000 foot. So the 1,000 foot really talks about, in our ordinance, talks about that residency issue. That's what this looks like, preventing them from residing within that 1,000 foot of those locations. A 100-foot zone is a child safety zone that incorporates that 100 feet from those locations. So in essence, to give you an example of a park, a city park, so Ceresco Park, for example, it would not be allowed within 100 feet of that location to be loitering in that area or to be there without any purpose, okay? Absent of one of the exceptions. Okay? A lot of the other communities are much more strict on theirs. We've decided to take a look at this and allow them this opportunity. Under the other zones, the 1,000 feet zone, for example, if somebody wanted, they couldn't basically be in any of those locations. So if you had employment at, maybe one of the factories here in town, you might be in violation. Or if you wanted to go to Subway for a sandwich or a restaurant on the west side, you might be in violation. That's why we've incorporated the 100-foot safety zone from those areas as well. So if you think about it as 1,000 foot for residency, 100 feet for occupying or being in that location, it makes a little bit of a difference there. When we talk about the exceptions that exist within the ordinance as it's outlined, it has exceptions specifically involving the school system, which again, they are already implementing some of that information in their current policies and practices within the school district. Talks about churches. And basically, when it comes to that point, they can be a member of the church, they just have to gain permission from that church to be there, okay, during hours of service. That would be an example of that exception for a church. There are some other exceptions that are outlined in the ordinance, and you certainly can take a look at those. But really, the bottom line here, and when I had discussions with the city administrator and the city attorney, was Ripon has become a dumping ground for us on this issue. And that's the issue that we're trying to address here, and that's why it's become such a problem for us. And we've tried to stay away from this, but it just has gotten to a point. When I start getting calls from jurisdictions that are 100 miles away from us that they want to dump sex offenders here, that's a problem. And I'm not willing to allow that to continue in our community. Questions, comments, concerns?
I recall, Chief, a conversation about 6 years ago on this very same issue. I'm sorry to hear that it's gotten out of control, because I do believe even these...
So currently, the east side of town, so you've got several apartment complexes over there, all the, you have Valley Crest Apartments, you have the other apartments on Jackson Street, there's several apartment complexes that's not covered by those 1,000-foot boundaries. Woodside, some portions of Ransom, maybe some portions of Lincoln Street, I believe, are on there. But that white area, that kind of diamond-shaped area, residing, and there are, I believe, some rentals and some portions of that. Also, if you look up behind that area, that newly developed area, Stony Ridge area, there's some apartments they have there and those type of things. But there is some opportunity here. I think that's important when you talk about an ordinance like this, is that we're not blocking out the entire city. We're still giving opportunity here for these people to reside within our community. Specifically, and as I look at that, historically, as I stated, we've understood that those people that are being released, if their support system is here, they need to have an opportunity to reside here. That's what I think this does. It still prevents them from being in those vulnerable or those specific areas that we deem are at risk, but it does allow them to establish residency here yet if they need to do that or can do that. Okay, even though we're restricting, if you look at the map, you might have an opinion that, boy, that's a lot of area. Yeah, it is, but we still have a good opportunity here for people to reside. So we felt that was important when we took a look at this ordinance, that we weren't closing out the entire community. That's why we decided on the 1,000-foot range for the residency. It still provides that opportunity. We felt in discussions with the city attorney that if the ordinance was ever challenged, that this gives us a good opportunity to argue that challenge because of the opportunity to still reside here. Now, when you talk about the 100-foot, again, that is not specifically about residency, but we wanted to make sure that even if they weren't residing next to a park, that they couldn't go down and sit in Ceresco. That's why we looked at the 100 feet safety zone around those vulnerable areas.
So, Julian, so for the offenders that are currently residing in those hotels month to month, is that considered residency, so they would be exempt from this ordinance until they move?
Yes, right now it is.
So
Yep. So residency is defined in the ordinance basically as any place you lay your head, place that you sleep.
Okay.
That's what defines residency within this ordinance. So currently, if they are there at that location today, and this is passed today, they're fine. Going forward from here, no new sex offenders could use that as a residence.
As long as they maintain that as a residency,
right,
they can stay.
Right. Same thing if there are currently, I think between 15 and 17 current residents within our community that are on the sex offender registry, okay, for a variety of offenses, variety of supervision levels. Those people would not be affected by this as long as they maintain that residency. Now, if they chose to move within their community to a different part that's protected, then they wouldn't be allowed to do that because the ordinance would be in effect at that point.
Okay. Julian?
I want to commend our police chief for bringing forward this ordinance. As someone who was a former school counselor, I take the safety and well-being of our children and youth to the utmost importance, and so I commend you for bringing this forward. I personally very much support adding this ordinance to our city. I have a request of consideration to my colleagues. In that, I'd like to request consideration of one additional exception. And that would be, and I would ask Lud to help maybe craft, sort of legally how this would be, but I think it's important, ultimately, I think we are a stronger society if communities take care of their own, right? To the point being is that we don't want to be burdened with other people from other areas that we have no connection with. They also have no connection with this city, and we're putting our people at risk. But for those residents where they have an offense that takes place and they're a current Ripon citizen, this does change significantly if this ordinance my understanding is, and I would refer to those to explain if I don't understand this right, it would be saying that they could not return to their place of residence that they originally had lived in. So my request for an exception would be something to the effect of to allow a resident to return to the place of residence they resided in at the time of the offense. Something to that effect. Because, for example, what we're saying is someone theoretically, once they serve their time under the court of law, I'm all for making sure that if they're accused that they do what they need to do. And my understanding is this would mean that they could not move to that. Now, right? Is that?
Can I just add, Attorney Ward says you're looking at, I would direct you to sub 5, sub A. And that sentence means in regards to what?
Which one, Bill?
Sub 5, sub A.
Person's residence continuously been on such property since prior to the adoption of this section.
So committed a crime, sent them to prison. They are now being released from prison several years later and want to go back to that address because they still own it.
It's been their continuous residence.
Well,
that wouldn't be if they're in jail.
Continuous residence was in
At the prison, or is it still at their house?
For voting, it's at the prison, isn't it?
I think the intent of this language is for your scenario. The person's residence has continued. An argument could be made, and there is some language in here regarding under a permit granted by the Common Council upon recommendation of the chief. And that's under section
9.
9 to that on a particular case-by-case
So if we didn't find that the exception under 5A worked, that
Yeah.
person
You may
could
be able
come
to go to
forward with a
Yep.
with
Say,
a
as chief of police,
request
adopt.
if the conditions at that residence are the same as when the offense occurred.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's.
You know, if there's still children present, if,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
there was crimes against children or.
Again, but wouldn't
you
that
know,
be controlled by the
But that would be something. And
Department of Corrections? Would
depending on their level of supervision,
Exactly.
their level of monitoring.
So that kind of ties back. 9 is probably the more appropriate language. I think the chief of police in consultation with the Department of Correction could say, I've got a request.
And I deny that,
Yeah.
they probably could come to this
Could come
council
to
and
the
say,
common council.
I wanted a appeal. Right?
Well, all right, I'm reading this on 5A, and it says prior to the adoption of this section. I think you're talking about after also,
Correct.
because what this is saying, if they're in prison right now and we adopt this, they can come back. Now, after we adopt this, if someone offends, goes to prison, they can't come back.
Under 5A. 5A, I think
That's
is a
where
little.
that's how I'm reading this
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, and again, it's that continuous residence. So they consider
Right.
it, the argument saying, yes, I was incarcerated, but yes, I was incarcerated, but throughout my incarceration, I still had a resident.
Right,
I
that's only for
maintained-
somebody
I
that's there
maintained
now.
a home, I maintained a.
Anyone that offends after we pass this, they're out of luck.
Not entirely, because sub 9
9, yeah.
says that it can still come to the common council.
Or they could ask for a permit to be issued by me for exception, which is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did reach out to,
So I think you're probably right.
Okay, I see
We'll
what-
skip 5A, but
Yeah.
I think 9 gives us an
yeah,
opportunity.
I was just asking for your interpretation of 5A as
Yeah.
that was written, but
Yeah.
I did ask a neighboring community, police chief, if he's ever been approached, or how many permits he's issued. He says he's never had the question.
Okay.
They have the very similar ordinance, absent of the 100 feet, 1,000 feet. Theirs is a little different, but they had the same language in here. This ordinance is pretty much identical to every community in Green Lake County. They operate this same ordinance with exceptions on to what the distance level is. So,
Yeah, so I think, Jolene, yours is answered by 9. Final answer.
And then that would be, no, because it's the public record, we could reference this right now and nothing else has to be changed?
Correct. 9 clearly would encompass that circumstance. And I think what the chief has highlighted is very important. We have a great working relationship with the Department of Corrections and have had that for a long period of time. I know that the former chief and I went around and backwards on whether we should adopt this type of ordinance, and he was of the same opinion that Chief Wallner is, that we know where these people are. We have a great relationship, so it's better not to try to push them out when we know where they are, and we know who they are, and we know what they're doing in this community, is that we're sensitive and we're concerned with. But again, the constitutional challenge, which I think will come eventually in this arena when communities do this blanket.
Then then a blanket restriction where they would just go underground.
Exactly.
And just disappear,
Exactly.
but it'd be there anyway.
Right, they're there then.
Just ignoring everything,
don't
because
know that.
clearly that's something we didn't want. So,
Exactly. Thank you.
Having but you can't live here, and we still want to keep track of you. We want to see you succeed, and we're going to try to create that environment for you. It's much better than letting them just kind of burrow in someplace and hide.
it still allows for that offender, once they're released, if this is their area of support, this is where they want to come back to, it still provides an opportunity to do that in certain areas of the city. So they still have that opportunity.
Terry?
Is this going to require any kind of like signage about the 100-foot rule within the city?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
I'd like to make a motion to pass a resolution requesting adjustment of countywide, next one, ordinance to create chapter 12.80 sex offender child safety zones of the municipal code.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
It's been moved by David, seconded by Terry. Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Iverson,
Yes.
Schatzinger,
Yes.
Bremer,
Yes.
Gallup,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Sorensen,
Yes.
Split.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for the work on that. All right, last item tonight is discussion on fireworks request from Ripon Fest. Adam?
So this was brought forward a couple months back. I submitted a letter to the council, kind of as a follow-up. So in my conversations with Ripon Fest, they are planning a fireworks show regardless of whether the city moves the city 4th of July or traditionally 4th of July fireworks. They have confirmed that to me through their committee and are fundraising to try to cover that cost as part of their event. I also reached out to the fireworks company, and they do have flexibility in the area if we wanted to move off of the 4th of July, but if you wanted to move back to the 4th of July, they would need greater notice, and it'd be a greater chance of securing it, because ultimately what happens is that somebody generally will take the 4th of July, or the crew that is scheduled for the 4th of July will have off, and they will want off, so it's time for holidays, all of that. So it is harder to get back to the 4th. So if we move off, they can probably accommodate that. If we wanted to move back to the 4th for whatever reason, that could be a challenge. In terms of donations, the city, the past 2 years, we have received $4,650 and $4,750 from local businesses and individuals supporting the 4th of July fireworks. That has covered more than 50% of our general budget. To do that, Ripon Fest is offering $3,000 to the city to contribute toward the fireworks show. There's no guarantee that obviously we make up that difference with donations. We certainly can try, but traditionally, or the past couple years, we have far exceeded the number of $3,000. And then finally, the city has been discussing, after last year, elevating the 4th of July fireworks. There have been conversations between the Parks and Rec Department and the Chamber of Commerce, as well as there is a local civic organization that has talked about bringing back a community softball game on the 4th of July at Murray Park. So there are individuals working and thinking about, how we handle the 4th of July at current arrangement of Murray Park with the Senior Activity Center and planning that out. Those are the knowns at this point. So certainly just looking for a final guidance or action from the council regarding the request to move it to June 29th by Ripon Fest.
I'll start. Since we have a senior center there now, I just believe it would be, let's do everything you're saying. I'm all in on the city and the businesses doing a 4th of July celebration on the 4th of July. And let's use our senior center and make the best use of everything here. I mean, I wish the best of luck to Ripon Fest and what they're doing, but I think it's a mistake if we pull out and do that. I'd rather us keep doing this on the 4th of July.
I feel pretty much the same as Dave. I've talked to a lot of people about that, and I actually drove around and looked where they'd be shooting out the fireworks like they did in the past. I've talked to a person that previously shot fireworks off for the Chamber of Commerce a long time ago. They had issues with hot ash falling on people, and actually, the carnival, I think they sued them because they had burn marks in their awnings. So, and I don't know if that was ever resolved, but that was an issue. And also, it's pretty residential up there. It'd be nice, to keep the booming, a lot of it, away from the residents if we can. Murray Park is perfect because of the sloped land and the safety of it. So that's would be my concerns. And also, I believe it should stay on the 4th of July.
The comments I got is the 4th of July is the 4th of July, and it should be, the city of Ripon should honor that and do the fireworks that night.
Yes, I agree with John. I've spoken to a lot of the folks up at Russell Manor, and it is something that they look forward to, as well as people who actually live in that area.
Seeing as it wouldn't be a change to any of our schedules, do we need a motion at all for?
We do not need a motion. It would mostly be a motion to change it, and I don't think from what we are.
So if anyone would like to make a motion to change to Ripon Fest and eliminate the 4th of July, you may do so now. If not, we will move on. Very good. Project updates and staff reports.
Stop by the office and pick up your packet.
Adam.
So next month, just a reminder, we only have one common council meeting, the 12th. So that could be a longer meeting. We'll have a few things on there just as the last meeting of the year. And we accomplished this past year, and a few other kind of year-end miscellaneous action items, etc.
All right. Chief.
I do have a couple things, actually. I didn't have I know it feels like January out there tonight, and so no parking on city streets between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. During the winter. You can gain either a winter parking pass permit through the winter parking season. But you need a permission for a night. You can access our website at riponpolice.com in order to do that. We also, Alan's not here, but the signage did go up on the Griswold Street truck route weight limit issue. So we've been up there, enforcement up there, and have made some stops in reference to that. I thought there was one other thing, but, this weekend coming up is Dickens. So we're going to make some alterations on that parade route. It's going to be extended a little bit down to Watertown Street and Watson Street. It will follow the same route as all the Watson Street. We will have some parking restrictions for both Friday night for the parade, so no parking in the downtown after 5 o'clock until the parade is finished. And then again on Saturday, as a reminder for Living Windows, we will have street reminders for that, but just for the public's information, just to highlight that a little bit. That's all I got.
Can I follow up with the?
Sure.
So you said for there are 3 nights that individuals can get an exception to the winter parking. And was we'd rather have them be able to keep their car the way where it is rather than try to drive drunk. Is that no? Is that, I thought that there are 3.
Yes, you can have up to 3 permits. So if tonight you put in for a permit or for an exception for tonight or a permission for tonight, you have a year to use up your other 2 from tonight's date. It's not calendar, it's based on when that first request goes in. So you can gain 3 permissions through that year to use up. Now, certainly, if there's extenuating circumstances or whatever, we work with people. We work with people. We didn't have snow at that time, but for Thanksgiving night, we didn't do. Usually on those holidays, we're pretty open to that because we know we have people coming into town and staying with friends and relatives. So a lot of times on those holidays, unless we get a big Dunkin' purchase for $50, a winter parking pass permit for the year, for the winter parking season. And if you Think about it, a cost of a parking citation is $20, so by paying 50, you're almost halfway there. If you have limited parking in your driveway, you have multiple vehicles, getting those winter parking permits, and then they would have to move them if we have 2 inches of snow or more, then they would have to move those vehicles off the street even if they have a permit.
And you said that on the website, they can find.
Call, we can help them gain that permission. If they're too drunk to navigate the website, we certainly don't want them driving, so we can help them through that. We hope if people are going to be going.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. That was all. All right. I was just going to mention that Dickens is this weekend, so everyone enjoy the festivities and be careful, be safe.
Is leaf pickup done? I've seen piles around, covered.
The snow, obviously, I would assume the end of this week, we will be done collecting leaves. The snow obviously is out there now.
Can people call the city and say, I have a leaf pile?
They certainly can let them know. Doesn't mean we will be able to get around to it, but, we kind of staged it down this year to say, this week we were going to have maybe one going around yet just to pick up, the remaining piles, but obviously with snow that can, throw a wrench in things depending on now the leaves may not be accessible or whatever, right? So I'll talk to Alan, but yeah, they can certainly call Public Works.
Okay. Jolene?
Unfortunately, I can't attend, but I want to say thank you to Ripon College for inviting all council members to their holiday party. I don't know if that's something that needs to be posted. Unfortunately, and that was nice that the college chose to invite us as council members. And then just a comment, this is the second meeting in a row where I feel a cold breeze. It feels as though the air conditioning is on in here. Just want to state that, so.
All right, anyone else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.